Hi, I'm Dr. Mel, and this is Dr. Mel's Message. I have a very unique interview today with a wonderful, incredible writer. Her name is Pamela Roberts Lee, and her book, The Darkness at Dawn, is incredible. I had the opportunity to read it over the weekend, and let me tell you, this is one that you won't want to put down. So without further ado, I want to let you meet Pamela. Welcome to Dr. Mel's Message, Pamela. How are you today?
I'm great and happy to be at Dr. Mel's. What is it?
Dr. Mel's Message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me. Dr. Mel's Message.
There's nothing more than I enjoy doing, and that is talking with fellow authors. I'm an author too.
Oh, good.
So I kind of understand the ins and outs of it.
All
but
right.
Tell me a little bit about The Darkness at Dawn.
You mean about the title or about the book itself?
About the book. And then we'll talk about how you got the title.
The Darkness at Dawn is full of conflicts. In other words, there are conflicts that stand out that, as soon as you read them, this is one of them. And there are conflicts that are, not so standoutish, but they're still conflicts. The conflicts exist because the characters create the conflicts throughout the books. If you read the book, you'll immediately see, that's one of the conflicts that Pam was talking about. And so the two major conflicts are between Richard Hawkes, who is one of the main characters, and at the start of the book, he's 19 years old, and he continues to become a vile and depraved person. He is. I think a lot of the problem with Richard Hawkes is that he doesn't believe in himself. He wants to believe in himself, and he does things that make you think he's trying to be himself, like a leader of a band of cutthroats, that sort of thing. That is the first conflict, because John Lee has made an oath early in the book to Richard Hawkes, because he saw Richard Hawkes in a storm in the middle of the night in the ship. He saw Richard Hawkes steal his church's chalice. It was a gold inlaid silver chalice, and Hawkes stole it that night in the storm while all the other passengers were trying to sleep, but it was difficult because of the nature of the storm. So what happens is that Hawkes the next day confronts John Lee and says, I know you saw me take that chalice, and I want you to swear to me right now that you will never tell anybody you took the chalice. And so Hawkes, naturally being the vile person that he is, he says, well, I'm never gonna tell you that I didn't take the chalice. And I will tell you this, that if you tell anybody that I took the chalice last night, I will throw Grace Newell, who is another one of the wards of the guardian of John Lee. And so what happens is that he does swear an oath, but not an oath that you would believe, because that's not his nature, and he's always a little bit snide when he talks to people, because he wants to have the advantage in the conversation, just like he has an advantage over them, just by nature of what he is. And so that is the first conflict that occurs and comes to light in the book.
All right. Well, before we go any further, I want to introduce everyone to the book trailer that you have. right, that was the trailer, and as you can tell, it is filled with what I call true teasers. It talks about not only the conflict that Pamela mentioned, but you could see there was something about a trial, witchcraft, you name it. Now, Pamela, all of that to me uh, has an intriguing aspect to it. But what I want people to know about you right now, a little bit about your background, because when you write about trials or you write about some of these things, what is your real life experiences and how did you bring this into it?
Well, I was a trial attorney, and always viewed myself, even now, as a trial attorney. Like, I could walk into a courtroom. The last time I tried a case was with the Department of Justice, and the trial took place in East St. Louis, the courthouse there. And I remember the day before they let us into the courthouse to look at the courthouse room and how we could set up all of our equipment so that we could get the right video. And you're using some of that here, and so you understand what I'm saying. And I walked up to the podium where the trial attorney who was addressing witnesses or making an oral argument or saying something to the court by way of argument. As soon as I touched the podium, it was like electricity went through me. It was like, this is where I belong as a trial attorney. Now, that's why in my books, there's going to be trials, because I find that interesting and stimulating to study how a trial would have been conducted during that period in time. And I actually have some books that discuss that as well. And as far as sentencing, hanging, originally when all the Puritans came over to New England, they had a way of trying their cases. They used all these special devices, like throwing somebody in water and seeing if they sunk. They actually did that stuff.
Right.
And if they confessed, then they would pull them out. But maybe if they dropped and they didn't confess, they might feel that that was because they were guilty, and so they didn't pull them out. But there was one guy who this occurred in Boston, I believe, and he wouldn't confess to anything, and so they started piling stones on him, and they just kept piling stones on him until he couldn't breathe, and then he died. And so they had a court system that was totally different from what we experience here. Doesn't mean that the skill set that you have wouldn't apply in that. In other words, I could cross-examine a witness there just as easily as I could cross-examine a witness here. And because that's the English common law system that they brought over, that is, the English brought over to New England when everybody migrated to New England. So in this particular case, and in a particular story, there's lots of trials and lots of court actions, pretrial confinement, and it's all there. It was difficult to find some of these. I had to dig through a lot of books. I collected a lot of books for the book itself, and in my library, they're all over the place, and they're going to grow out the window, I think, at some point, because there are just so many of them. But I have a lot of books on writing. This was the first time I ever wrote a novel, and so I needed a lot of guidance, and so I bought a lot of books on writing. I have a whole library that's set up with writing instruction books, and then I've got something on the history of New England, which a lot of people don't know, but in that time, New England was basically on an isthmus that jutted out into the bay, and because of that, sometimes there was flooding on the isthmus, because that's the only way they could get to Boston, which was right in the middle of that bay. And so that was one of the reasons why it was dangerous to go out to places like Boston, because you didn't know if the water was going to rise enough so you couldn't get back.
So when we do read the book, like I said, there's a lot of it in it, but what was the hardest part for you?
What was the hardest part to write, research, or just generally
Oh,
play with?
yeah. What was the hardest part? Because I know you're
Um,
comfortable with the trial aspects of it and, the
yeah,
sentencing stuff, but there's a lot more to it in there.
sure there is, and the hardest part was not the beginning. The hardest part was doing the research so I could write certain sections of it. Like, you know, I studied all of those cases, all of the cases that came out of what came to be the Salem witchcraft trial, pre trial, and so that's and a lot of it also the religion is different, and the Puritan religion is different, and I studied that. I had to write sections where that religion got pulled into the book, and there are several occasions when that happens when the main character is in a position where he has to deal with a religion that I was not familiar with as the writer, and so I had to do a lot of research and understand it so that I could put it in the book. That was probably the most difficult because well, the first conflict is with Richard Hawks over theft of the chalice. John had many other occasions to confront Hawks, and Hawks, made efforts to confront Lee, and so those two were the first major conflict. The second major conflict was with John's problem with the Puritan religion. He believed that the Puritan religion was um, in conflict with the religion that his father taught him of, which was basically the religion of the Church of England, and so which nowadays I guess is tied and familiar with the Episcopal Church in America, but John was in conflict with that idea though because he believed that he was being pulled into a religion that was not the religion that he wanted to have, which was more a religion that was um, Christ-like or God-like, and not so much uh, fire and brimstone that a lot of the Puritan churches taught, and the early Episcopal Church in New England taught that as well. So John had to find a place where he could be comfortable with his religion, and he finally met with uh, the the priest of that church, and was told why what he was worried about was something he didn't need to be worried about. And he said that as far as I don't want to give too much of this away because
Right.
this is the tension. John goes to make that meeting by himself, and he's walking to the house of the minister, and he gets cold feet. He's wondering whether this is the right thing to do. Maybe he shouldn't. But fortunately for him, he got the right answer, or the answer he needed to have, and and so he felt comfortable going forward using the belief system that he'd been taught in the Episcopal Church.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit about the title itself, The Darkness That's
Sure.
At Dawn. How'd you come up with that?
It was it wasn't it wasn't a miracle. It was a name. I when I was first started researching the book, I was trying to come up with as I read more and more stuff. My husband Matt and I we went to New England, we went to Boston, and we went to bookstores and found really old books. We got books now that are from like the 1600s,
Oh,
and yeah, and a map of Cambridge, Massachusetts that was made in that time period as well. And so, as far as the title went, well, first of all, I wanted to come up with a vile character. I mean, he had to be really bad, and you read the book and you know that Richard Hawks is really bad. but anyway, with regard to Richard, he has to always be on top of things. He has to be the one that directs people to do things, and he is the person that you love to hate. And I won't tell you what happens to him, or that'd be telling the audience. So, but yeah, he is. To me, he's the most interesting character. I would put Nisha Hegan, who's the Indian spiritual Indian in the book. I would put him ahead of Hawks, except that that I like Nisha Hegan. I think he's a good character. I think he ties everything together at the end of the book. Something that John finally comes to realize that um, that Nisha Hegan, who is so spiritual and helpful to John, he always seems to come up with the answer that John's thinking about, but he hasn't really stated it. And all of a sudden, Nisha Hegan will say something like, "Well, teacher, let me tell you what happened to me when I was, somewhere out west," and that sort of thing. He usually comes up with an answer that helps John.
Well, one
Yeah.
of the things I want to back you up for just a second, because one of the things that I really found very, very interesting was how you developed the characters. And then each time that you developed the characters, the way they intertwined with each other. And like you said a minute ago, how you set them up. Because I think you're one of the best writers that I've read in a long time of setting up what was about to come, where the reader doesn't know it, and then all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that's what she was doing,"
Yeah, it's foreshadowing.
Yes, you have done
Foreshadowing.
it brilliantly in this. I mean, brilliant.
Yeah.
So
Well,
kudos to you on that.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait to start writing this next book. I mean, I get really excited about it, and then I start writing, and things just boom. They just keep moving and moving. This one took me. I think about seven years to complete from start to finish.
To start to finish. Did
Yeah.
you find the editing process difficult, or?
No, I didn't find. I mean, I was surprised because I'm not an editor, and I had plenty of people that are editors look at it, and they had changes, and some of them rejected it. That sort of thing that happens to an author.
Yeah.
And
Well, with The Darkness at Dawn, who do you think the target audience is?
who's the target
Audience? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Richard Hawks.
No. Who do you think is going to really fall in love and read this book?
Oh, okay. Targeted reader.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Yes.
I think somebody that's interested in historical fiction,
Right.
yeah, and also interested in character development, who would be enjoy the interplay between characters.
Right.
That's why I put a lot of dialogue in the book. I wanted each of the characters to have an opportunity to take the stage and say something that might in the reader's mind might move them up a notch or two.
Yeah, but it's not useless dialogue. I
No,
mean, they're
it's
not
not.
just talking to talk. They're
No.
not talking heads. I mean, they truly, it's kind of like E.F. Hutton, when a character is speaking, you need to pay attention to what they're saying.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
and whenever I had a character speaking, I remember the first time I wrote dialogue.
All right.
This was early in the process. Probably I was working on chapter 1, because I think I had to introduce the first characters that come into play in the book, and once I've done that, then those characters have a voice, and I can play with that voice more if they've already been introduced. But on a lot of occasions, I had characters walk into a scene. They needed to, like a mother needed to see her son and find out why he hadn't called her. Well, they didn't have phones then, but why he didn't visit in a long time. But I don't have that type of dialogue. No, is not there. But I like writing dialogue. The first time I wrote a scene for dialogue, I read it to my husband Matt, and his first comment was, "You've brought them to life." they're actually talking. They're real people, and we had a discussion about that, and that's true. The dialogue brings the character alive and
Yeah,
brings.
and it does come across that way in this book.
Good. Well, thank you, thank you. I I found that fun to do. Almost every scene, you know, I like to turn a narrative into a scene, you know, rather than just keep discussing, you know, narration and stuff like that, because then you're going to end up, you know, wondering, why did I write that? You know, but if you write it and the scene begins to come to life, then all of a sudden, you know, I just need to write this, that, and the other, and that's going to make that scene even stronger. So, yeah, and then the editing process, you talked about editing, the editing process, I like doing editing of my own work. And so I was editing it, and John went out on the deck after the storm, and he was watching all the people up in the rat tails and the, you know, keeping the ship moving forward. And their sister ship was seen in the distance. Two ships traveled together back then if they had passengers and stuff like that, because if they were in a storm and one ship went down, then there was no way for the survivors to survive. They'd just be in the water, you know, trying their best to keep their head above. And during that storm, John was very concerned, you know, storm that starts the book, John was very concerned that the ship would not stay steady enough to deal with all the waves and stuff that were hitting it. But the storm ended, and it was that point that they made a serious effort to get to New England and then down the coast to Boston. And when they come into Boston, I had to come up with an idea of what Boston looked like then. And when Matt and I were in Boston, he found a book that had a great information on that. And I used that to help write what it looked like. I mean, all the ships in the docks, you know, and maybe a couple ships moored out in a bay, you know, because there wasn't room on the docks. And so they came into Boston Harbor, and John just surveyed the entire scene. And that's how I got the description of Boston in the book, is that I put it in the book through John's eyes. And meanwhile, Hawks had already come in, and he did the same survey with his eyes, but he wasn't looking for the docks and everything. What he was doing was he was looking for places where he could store things that he had stolen, and that was the first time I introduced Hawks as a thief, as a grand thief, actually, not just casual thief that goes in and grabs something off a countertop. So yeah, he's actually looking for a big building where he could store stolen corn. That corn was a commodity, was something that had value, just like coins back then. Eventually, they quit using it because it was too bulky, you know, to move around. But that's one of the earlier scenes. John is, you know, he's young. I mean, he's I can't remember what the age I put him at, but certainly it's 12, I believe, 12 years old, and Hawks is 19, and so the scenes the early scenes always have an outcome that favors Hawks. Hawks is stronger. If he doesn't like what John's saying to him, Hawks will immediately, you know, jump on him and tackle him, take him to the ground, and they'll fight until somebody comes along and breaks up the fight. You know, I think. What was your first question? I'm sorry, I didn't write it. I should write this stuff down.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I was asking you how you came up with the title, and we just kind of went
everywhere. Oh, The
Darkness
at Dawn. Yeah, I came up with the title, The Darkness at Dawn. It came to me almost just out of nowhere. At dawn, I like the idea of dawn. I like the idea of the conflict between the use of the word dawn at the end and the darkness at the beginning. There are books out there, but I didn't look at them, and I I don't attribute any of my use of The Darkness at Dawn to their use because it's their book. But the darkness, I wanted something that would be contradictory, sort of, but also something that would grab the reader's interest, like just like you just did. How did you come up with The Darkness at Dawn? And so yeah, and I knew there'd be questions about that. It's a great title.
It is a great title.
And the cover of the book is a great cover. I don't know if we've shown it yet, but
no, I haven't shown it yet, but it has been showing throughout.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah.
I'll show it.
You put the trailers up. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that we got that cover was my husband, Matt, and I had gone to New England to do research. And we went to the Pequot Indian Reservation, which were the Indians back then. And they had a whole warehouse that were set up with teepees and little campfires. And they were trying to show people what it was like to live during that Pequot time, which is the time we're talking about right now.
Right.
And they did that because they had gotten that land from the federal government. All of the Indian tribes have the opportunity to apply to the Department of Interior, I believe, to get lands that they can live on. And in this case, the Pequots did that, but they also took a warehouse and turned it into like a camp that they would have, a realistic camp, and they had people. And then they had also creations of people, not real people, but people that would look like Indians. And they were there, and so we walked through there, and you just got the whole sense, the feel for what it was like then. And in our trip out there, we ran across several places where Indians had done the same thing. So I had a notebook, I wrote a note. One of the things I did that still sticks in my mind, because I think it was so original, at least to me it was original. As we walked through these different camps that the Indians had set up, and there was a place where there was an English camp, not a camp, but an English town, small place, and the Americans that ran it had done a lot of work to fix the campfires, so they were fine, and there was no risks for fires and stuff. But it was built to conform to the time of Andrew Jackson, and to go there and know that you're standing in a place that is like the place that Andrew Jackson's people would have lived in during the 1830s when he was president, was really amazing. And as I sat there or stood there, I closed my eyes and I looked up and I opened them, and then I could see these birds just circling. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the way that things were for the people that lived during the 1670s too. I mean, they hadn't changed the way of life very much. I mean, they had displays showing all the things that they could do, like churning butter and all this. And that I think a lot of times when people read books or novels, that particularly historical novels that they like, they overlook that type of research that supplements the reading of the novel itself. I just kept trying to find places that would be like what it was like. The ship. Oh, let me finish with this, or not finish, but at least get to it. The Mayflower 2 is docked in Plymouth Harbor, and we went to see the Mayflower 2 because we wanted to see it, wanted to know what it was like. And also because Matt and I both wanted to have the experience of being in the ship, under the ship, to see all the different things. And in the book, particularly in that first chapter, our first two chapters, I described what the interior of the ship was like that they came over on. And it was basically like the Mayflower 2. But the Mayflower 2 sailed across the Atlantic during modern times just to see what would happen. And sure enough, the same thing happened to the Mayflower too. That happened to the Mayflower. They got buffeted by water, and so they dropped lower, and then they came up higher, and so that was, and I wrote copious notes about the interior of the Mayflower too, and it was really exciting to see that, and see the tiller that they used to move the ship one way or the other. You push it the opposite the way you want to go, and you'll go off that way, to the left. If you push to the right, you go to the left. So yeah, I think that was the extent of our research in person, was when we finished with the Mayflower too.
Well, that is really fascinating, but I have one question that I have not been able to find yet. You ready?
Yeah, I'm always ready.
And this is about your cover. Okay.
Okay.
Now, you're right. It is a gorgeous cover. And the title itself, The Darkness at Dawn, is opposites, because you have the darkness and dawn.
Yeah.
But there's certain aspects of this cover, like the name John Lee. Is that superimposed in there, or is that a relative, or is that a real tombstone?
Yeah, that is John Lee's tombstone. John Lee is my ancestor from that time period. Also, ancestors of mine are, well, not ancestors, but descendants from John Lee include also Harry and yeah, Prince Harry and Prince, let's see, Prince Harry and Prince William.
Really?
They're descendants of John Lee also. And well, I think my husband found and is interested in the fact that John Lee was also an ancestor of Felicity Huffman. So there you go.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I was just curious. I see this and I'm like, And I was at, we could be related, because my grandmother was a Lee.
Oh yeah. From where?
From Tennessee, actually.
Okay, Tennessee. Yeah.
And Texas. From that area.
Yeah. Texas. Yeah.
So it's a small world sometimes.
Yeah.
Now let's get back. I don't want to give it away. Okay.
All right. Don't give it away.
I won't, and it's hard not to. So I'm going to be very careful with my words.
All right.
As we move through these multiple conflicts, okay, sure, that you have set up so beautifully in the book with the characters. All right.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part when you had to write that last? I can't say it.
The story's end.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. How hard was it to let go of that?
Well, it's the end of the story, basically, and that makes it very hard.
Yeah, but these people seem like they're real people. I mean, when you really read this book, you get to know these people. So it's like, how hard was it to actually let go of them?
Oh, you mean like let the story go and try to forget about it or something like that? You know?
Because these are
move on to the next
chapter. Created.
Yeah, move on to the next chapter. The ending of the book needed to be done the way that I did it, because John was involved in these conflicts, you see,
right.
And that kept moving him along, because he was trying to get at Richard Hawks, and of course, Mary Hart is a young woman who he was enthralled with, and so there was that, and eventually he and Mary got closer, and if you remember the picnic, and Hawks and his men come up to John Lee and threaten him, but John stands him down, and Hawks lets him through. So, but at the end of the book, my difficulty was how John reconciled everything that had happened to him, and was able to come up with the solution to what he needed to do to resolve all the conflicts he felt within himself, and those conflicts all almost always involve Richard Hawks, and so he's trying to figure out what he can do about that. But I haven't written this part yet. I mean, I've written the first part, that I was just describing.
Right.
But I resolved it because John, wanted to believe in the God of his father, and his father had passed away and was gone and was in England, so he couldn't talk to him, and he'd have to sail over there even if he was alive. And because so John adopted his father's beliefs, and the more he thought about it, the more he thought that those beliefs had to be what God really wanted, because he was a benevolent, kind God. That's the kind of God John was thinking about by the end of the book, because all these character resolving scenes really are already done. Then John begins to start thinking about all these things and how he's resolving all these things, and by the end of the book, that's where we're at. That Hawks has now been imprisoned, for various murders and crimes of, heinous crimes and stuff like that. And the other, Hawks's henchmen, Eastman and Roach, who are out there doing bad things, but now they're getting away from the law and moving into the wilds, and so that's what they do. So all the characters seem to go off in different directions, but basically for the same reason, because they just want to get away from the life they've been living with Richard Hawks. I mean,
right.
Richard Hawks gets tried at the end of the case, or the book. Yeah.
Well, this is a book that could branch out in so many ways with the different characters, like you said, a story of their own,
Right.
Which is just beautiful. And for those that may have just been jumping into the last part of this, I have been chatting with Pamela Roberts Lee, who is the author of The Darkness at Dawn. And if you are looking for a character-driven, plot-driven, foreshadowing-driven, epic novel, historical novel, this is the novel to read. Now, with that, Pamela, what's next for you?
Well, I'm working on which would be my second novel. So I'm working on that now. And the title is consistent with the way that I came up with the title for The Darkness at Dawn. The title is tentatively A Light at Midnight. And so it flips it from what the dark people think of the darkness at dawn. They're thinking about, midnight or something.
Well, please tell me it's not going to take you 7 years to write this one.
I don't plan on doing that. I'd like to do other things,
Yeah.
It seems like I'm getting more and more involved in doing a lot of political stuff, but I'm going to hold off on that. My husband, Matt, keeps telling me, get back to your next book, start working on it. So
I agree with him. I mean, I cannot wait to read your name. You've got a lifelong fan in me right now.
Oh, that's great.
I love epic novels. I love everything about what you have done with this book. And I just cannot thank, number one, Strat Advertising for bringing you to me. They are just phenomenal to work with.
Good. Great.
And I can't thank them enough. They're just freaking awesome. And I can't thank you enough for the time of spending with me this afternoon. And you were just a delight. And I encourage everyone out there, you do need to read The Darkness at Dawn by Pamela Roberts Lee. It is incredible.
Wow, what a compliment that is. Thank you.
Well, I just don't say it, just to say it. I mean it. Well, my reputation's on this too.
Oh yeah. I think we're both pulling on the same oars. So
I think we do. And I just really, I love everything about what you have done. And it is a master class in dialogue. I will say that.
Great. Good. Well,
I love it.
We need to get back to work.
All right. Well, thank you again. And thanks, Strat Advertising. And I cannot wait for y'all to get a hold of this book. It is available now on Amazon, and it is well worth the read. Matter of fact, it's a must read. Again, I'm Dr. Mel.
Yeah, it actually did. When within a few months, I think the book came out, it was on top of Amazon's list for, this type of book and this class and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. It's rated high even today. So,
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
I haven't looked to see where it's at lately. I've been too busy doing other stuff. So, yeah.
All right. Well, again, Pamela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank your husband for setting it up for us too, the camera.
I will do that.
And I will send this over to Strat Advertising before I post or anything.
Okay.
Because I think y'all wanted to see it.
I would love to see it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but before I post it is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's
okay.
Good. That's good.
All right, sweetie. It was nice meeting you.
Great. It's good meeting you. What are you working on right now?
I actually, let me stop recording.